Hey everybody, welcome back to On Stage, Off Stage. I'm your host, George Sapio, and this is episode number 174, February of 2024. Our guest this month is Ekaterina Wagner. Ekaterina is a playwright and much more. She is an art critic and editor. She does amazingly wonderful things with words. We met last March, almost a year ago now, at a MacDowell residency. And her work was some of the first that I picked up and started to read, and believe me, I was hooked. You're going to hear all about it. One of the first things I read when I was at MacDowell was your play, okay, How Not to Offend a Partisan. And I'm not sure what I expected, but I found it absolutely hilarious. A little confusing because there were things going on I didn't quite understand at first, but I also found it very probable. I didn't think it was, a dream or anything. To me, this sounded like humans, especially humans in government, acting to the least of their abilities. So, yes, I know that it's a satire, but, and you had it produced at the Portland Playhouse Auditorium last June. So, yay, congratulations on that. Let's talk about where the play came from, how long it took you to write it, and if you have a revision process. So where did this play come from?
Oh, it came up very unexpectedly. There was a political trial going on. And I've seen a Facebook post by my friend who wrote, do you all know that there's a dramedy unfolding in real time in court, just as we see here now? And so I got curious and I decided to check it out. And it is not usually allowed to film or take photographs in Russian courts, but there were two journalists from independent media outlets which were not blocked or at that time.
Right.
But they were still functioning. They were called Media Zona and Medusa. And they were doing a kind of a live textual translation from the courtroom. So they tweeted or whatever they did, whatever was going on in court. So they were almost literal transcripts. And they were indeed hilarious. Because it was not...
This is not typical, right? Usually courts don't allow live feeds or live recordings of the procedures, correct?
Yes, but it was not a live recording. They were just texting on their phones.
Okay.
They didn't record.
All right.
They were just hearing and typing what they heard, and it went online almost immediately. And it was not a regular trial. It was a trial of a very famous Russian politician and now our most famous political prisoner, whose name is Alexei Navalny. Maybe you've heard about him from a documentary film that has won an Oscar not so long ago.
Okay, I haven't seen the film, but I do know his name, and I do know that he has a reputation for angry criticism of the powers that be, which is, I assume, he's now in jail, correct?
Yes, and he was recently sentenced to yet another prison term of 19 years.
Ouch.
In the very strict kind of penal colony. I know for Americans it may not sound so dreadful because you have prison terms of 100 years. But believe me, a Russian prison can be much harsher than American one. So this trial was absurd from the beginning because the very reason for it was very contrived. He was accused of offending a 94 or 95 years old veteran of the Second World War, who used to be a partisan in his youth.
He was put in jail for insulting somebody?
No, he was at that time he was sentenced to a really big fine.
Okay.
But he was put in jail for something else, which was very much contrived as well, for some economical crimes, allegedly, which he allegedly committed.
Sure.
But that did not look very convincing. So they needed something more convincing to prove that he's such a bad man, such an awful person. So they invented this case with a veteran who actually took part in a presidential campaign of Putin. He was on some video with several other celebrities. The veteran was not celebrity, but there were some celebrities in that video who were campaigning for Putin. And Navalny commented on it on his Twitter, and nobody really reads Twitter in Russia. It's not very popular. But the secret services apparently did read his Twitter, and he wrote something like, "Oh, just look at them. What are they doing there?" So it was not even an offense. He didn't use offensive language, but they used it as a pretext to begin the trial against him as soon as he landed in Moscow after his return into Russia from Germany.
Right.
After he was nearly poisoned in Russia, but doctors in medicine saved his life. I see that it's a very wrong introduction, but otherwise it would seem confusing to the listeners as much as it seemed to you when you were reading the play. So he was tried for this very absurd alleged crime, and he's a very witty man. He's a lawyer by his background, and at that time he was very ill, and nobody knew that. At that moment, he had some problem with his spine, and they didn't allow doctors into his prison, and they didn't allow any medicines. So he was suffering from that, but he didn't disclose it. So he was very irritable at the time of that trial.
Sure.
And that's why there were a lot of very absurd dialogues during these court proceedings between him and between the defendant Alexei Navalny and the prosecutor and the judge and all the witnesses. So he was arguing with them a lot, and he told them in their faces that they were lying, that they were taking up the cause. They didn't not even know how to make up the cause properly. So that's all his real words. And afterwards, he was put under trial again for offending the court and received another prison term for that as well.
Oh boy, seems like he couldn't do anything right.
Yes. Well, actually, he could do one thing right. He could have stayed in Germany.
Well, yeah.
But at that time, who could have known that they will imprison him for life? Maybe because they keep extending his prison term. So that sounded like a dramedy at the time, in fact. And I started writing down all these absurd dialogues and arranging them into the play. So the first part of the play is almost a verbatim.
Oh,
That's why there are so many characters in it. So many characters, because I was just following what was going on in there.
It's almost reporting.
Yes, it's almost reporting.
But having read this play, I read it several times because it kept drawing me back, and the characters just seemed to start off silly and then become more and more absurd. And it seemed as if the absurdity just fed in upon itself. Characters not being who they were or who they seemed to be. They would turn out to be someone completely different, someone not as powerful. Excuse me. Someone whose identity is fake. And it seemed like everybody wanted to know if somebody else was naked in there. That phrase came up more than a few times. And I found myself just by the end of this play, my head was spinning, but I did find it at the same time hilarious and yet very plausible and very scary.
Oh, thank you.
Well, you're welcome.
Thank you for that observation. And I'm really happy that you found it plausible, because the one thing that puzzled me is why were they doing all those absurd things? Like everybody during that trial realized that it is a total absurd.
Yeah.
Of course, the judge and the prosecutor and all the witnesses, they were making fools of themselves in front of the public, because there was that online reporting. Everybody would know. So what was it doing it for? That's a question that I asked myself, and I couldn't find the answer. So I tried to invent the answer and tried to guess what could have been motivating these people to act in such an insane and cruel and absurd way. So they must have been having really good reasons, really strong reasons to do all that. And so that's a question which sadly gets more and more relevant every day. How ordinary people get complicit in the crimes of the government.
Mm-hmm.
So, this play was written before the war, and now I think I would never have written such a play, because it does not feel like comedy anymore. As too much blood have been shed. Too much Ukrainian blood and Russian blood. So it's more tragedy than comedy now.
And
unfortunately.
It's a terrible crime what's going on over there right now. This whole war is, I believe, unnecessary in the first place, and so many innocent people are suffering because of it. Could you get in any kind of jeopardy for having written this play?
I don't think so. Well, you never know. As you probably have heard, a theater director and a playwright were put on trial recently for a documentary play about women who went to Syria to marry these Islamic State fighters.
Sure.
He went there to become their wives. They met them online, and when they had to return to Russia, they were put on trial and sent to prison for being complicit in terrorism.
Oh boy.
So the playwright apparently got puzzled and asked herself, how did those women come to this? And the play was based on interviews with a lot of real women who went to see her. But the funny and the scary thing is that this play received a state prize for theater, for the best play, for the best directing. I don't remember, but it received several nominations.
Yes.
Received the state award called Golden Mask in several nominations. So, and now they are in prison for that. So you never know.
Oh boy, well,
it works in the future.
Yeah, it's hard to know what's somebody's going to be offended at. I know that freedom of speech is tenuous at best in most places, and it's very tricky.
Yes, but I'm against self-censorship because I do believe that self-censorship leads to many awful things.
I agree with you.
We should not be afraid without reason, without a real reason. Of course, I would not go out on the Red Square with a sign saying "Stop the war" because I will be arrested for it in 2 minutes.
Yes,
but
there are other smarter ways to express yourself.
Yeah. I think writing a play is not the most dangerous thing to do.
Yeah.
But the very surprising thing to me is the fact that people in America got interested into that. That several people at the residency in McDowell, where
yes, yeah,
they have read it, and I received positive comments from a few other residents, and then I sent it to PDX Playwrights, which is an association of playwrights in Portland, Oregon, and they stage public readings regular every month, I think, or even more frequently. So they also liked it, and there was a public reading in Portland.
I wanted to ask you about that. What was the audience response to this play? Because I definitely want to ask you about being a Russian and writing a play and having it in front of a U.S. audience, because the sensibilities are so different. Okay, you and I, we can talk about 100 things, and each, you and I will see things a little bit differently. Our senses of humor are a little bit differently. Our political views, our views about the general public, about society and culture, they differ. So when this was presented as an absurdist comedy, which is it's what I'm calling it, what was the reaction from the audiences in Portland?
I was surprised by their reaction because they were getting the jokes, and in fact, the reaction was very positive. There were not too many people, and there were also some Russian speakers in the audience, including a director of a Russian-speaking theater there, which is called Full House. And she also liked that play. And as far as I know, they're going to have a reading in Russian. So of the same play, also in Portland, Oregon, because there's a huge Russian-speaking community of ethnic Russians and ethnic Ukrainians as well. And there are 3 community theaters which produce plays in Russian there, which is really interesting.
Okay.
And but even American audience seemed to get the humor, and I think that's because absurd is universal. Like when you see that something is absurd, that's obvious.
Sure, yeah.
They asked a lot of questions, and they also thought, like you did, that it was a satire. So they were surprised to know that they were actual moments of the real court proceedings. That's difficult to believe if you have not lived in Russia for a while.
Yeah, but satire is so based in truth that a good satirist, a good satirical writer can just almost, as you say, take it verbatim and show how ridiculous it can be, because we humans, we are so good at not being sensical and making fools of ourselves and being contradictory that in some senses satire is almost too easy.
That's true. Unfortunately, that's very true in Russia. And documentary theater is developing very fast in Russia, or at least it was before the war, because now a lot of people had to move out of the country, including the theater director Alexander Chernousov, whom I know from Russia, and he also took part in this production in Portland, Oregon, in the role of the defendant, so of Navalny himself, and he gave a brilliant performance. I should say, so he used to do documentary performances in Russia, but now he's continuing this in Portland, Oregon. Which, but he had to leave because of the war, and also many other directors and actors are now working all over Europe and the United States of America, which is probably a good thing for global theater, for international theater, but not for the Russian one.
No, the Russian theater is obviously suffering. But it's also hard on the expatriates too, on the expats who have to leave their country and find a way to start all over and to support themselves as an artist in a different country. It's such a shame that has to happen in the first place, but it's so difficult to manage having to leave your home.
Yeah, that's very true. But in comparison with the flag of the millions of Ukrainians, it feels almost immoral to complain about that. But of course, like those people who had to leave Russia, they are not very welcome in Europe or wherever they have gone. Many have gone to Georgia or Armenia or Kazakhstan, all the nearby countries. And they often they can't go back, and it's difficult for them to integrate into the new countries. So it's very complicated. But for some, especially for artists, this could be a chance to really boost their international career, because they did not think about immigration before, and they had good career inside Russia. But now they had to leave, some on moral grounds, some because they could be persecuted as activists.
Right.
And now they're restarting their careers, and they're still doing art, and they get exhibitions, or they work in the theater if they're theater artists. So they are integrating. They are not outcasts, which is a good sign to me.
Yeah, it is a good sign, but again, at what cost? It'd be nice if your own country could support you, but when it's dangerous to say what you actually think, then yeah, it makes a lot more sense to go someplace else where your work and your life can be not just tolerated, but appreciated and encouraged. It's a phenomenon that's starting to happen more and more now in the United States. Uh, there are organizations of people who feel that it is better to prevent people from reading certain books or speaking out about certain things, political and social, and to repress the rights of people who need medical care because of their own beliefs. And normally we can find a way to get around this in the States, but it's becoming harder and harder because more people in power are becoming much less tolerant of the diverse population that, so the United States is not the bastion of freedom that all the brochures tell us. So I think we're heading down the same road towards the same kind of trouble.
Oh, I think it is a very dangerous trend, and I hope you are not repeating the mistakes that my country has made, because freedom of speech is essential. If you give up on that, then you will gradually lose everything else, all the other freedoms. So this one is that you should guard and protect as hard as you can, because the right to speak up is essential. And this also worries me because currently, for instance, I have a play which cannot be produced in Russia because there is a law that you should not do any propaganda, as it is called, of a non-traditional relationship, meaning sexual relationship, meaning LGBTQ. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So essentially, you don't have the right to depict LGBTQ characters in the theater, on the stage. You cannot put them on the stage. And I have a play which features two gay characters. But the funny thing is that it's impossible to produce it in the United States as well, or so I suspect, because those characters are not depicted as victims or as activists or as people who are fighting for LGBTQ rights. They are quite controversial. And I'm afraid that in America, the director should be very brave to produce a play like that.
Why are they controversial?
They are controversial because they are not totally 100% good people. Okay. Because gay people, like all other people, can be good and can be bad, or they can have different sides, a little bit of that and that. There's no black and white in life. So some of the things they do are not really good.
Yeah, that sounds to me like a very interesting play. Because
I should attempt to translate it.
I want to talk to you about that. Well, let's just go to that now. Translating a play from Russian into English. I wonder about, first of all, because we have different ways of looking at the same things. One is a Russian way of looking at it. One is an American way of looking at it. And hey, terrific. But when you want to translate the Russian words and the Russian sensibilities and the Russian points of view into English, into American. How complicated does that get? I'm assuming that so many things are common between us. That would be ridiculous to not assume that. But the specific points of view, how do you make an American understand a Russian point of view using the words? Because it's hard enough to get the right words into the text in the first place. I mean, I know as a playwright, I spend hours sometimes finding the right word, okay, to communicate the right sentiment, the right feeling, the right directive. But when you have to translate that, do the words sometimes not match up? What's the difficulty with something like that?
Well, I think the difference in our approach is that you are a playwright and you think as a playwright. And I am, in addition to being a playwright, I'm also a journalist and an editor and a translator. And that was my actually first occupation. I came to writing plays rather late in life, at 40. And actually, my very first job was to translate a book from English into Russian. That's what I did at the age of 15. It was a novel.
Wow.
So I've been translating back and forth for my entire life, because when I worked at the art newspaper Russia, I used to translate from English into Russian a lot, and sometimes I had to do it very quickly. Like I had maybe an hour or two to do that, to translate a rather long article, because in journalism you sometimes have to act very quickly. And now I'm working for an English-speaking publication on art, which is called Art Focus Now. And for that, I translate a lot from Russian into English. So in journalism, you don't always have the time to sit and think and pick the right word.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, because there's a deadline.
Yes.
There's always a deadline. So for me, it's like an everyday activity. I don't put that much thought into it. And I don't know if it helps. Maybe my translations are not really that clear for Americans. I don't know.
Well, so you've been doing this for a very long time, so I'm sure that your expertise in translating from one to the next, especially for something in a journalistic fashion which relies on facts and relies less on manipulating the emotions of an audience as it is to translating information, I'm sure it's probably spot on most of the time.
Well, normally I translate text on contemporary art, and those texts can be really complex with all those long sentences and strange terms and all sorts of things. So normally they are more complicated than my plays, because I write for the stage. They are meant to be read aloud, to be pronounced. So I find it much more easier to translate a play than an article. And of course, artificial intelligence helps us a lot, because now...
Oh, there's a subject that's very touchy. Yeah.
Yes, of course. But it's a helpful tool. It's helpful anyway. There are translation tools now online, which are free to use, and they're doing quite a good job. But of course, you have to edit. You don't trust them. I don't trust artificial intelligence.
I wouldn't trust them too much either, but I think they get a lot of the initial work done.
Yes, and they make translation a lot faster. And they are absolutely much better with the articles than I am. Because for a Russian speaker, articles are an inscrutable thing. We don't have them in our language. We do very well without them. So it's always difficult to decide which one to use, or maybe sometimes you don't need them at all. It's difficult, but for artificial intelligence, it's quite easy.
Okay, well, that's going to be a discussion for another day, I think, because we could go on with artificial intelligence, which frankly scares the heck out of me. I'm not sure I want the machines to have that much control or to be moving into the realm that I feel I should, as a human, be the only one in, which is creativity, which is art, which is, it's once they start making art in lieu of humans, that's going to be scary. That's going to be very scary.
It's scary indeed, but all the technology is scary at first. We know from history that when cinema was invented, people were afraid that it will kill theater, and when television was invented, people were afraid that the films will die out and there will be no cinema because now we have television.
No, I think the only thing that television killed was human intelligence.
But I think it's all in the same line because it's all technology, just the next level of technology. And on one hand, it's scary because some jobs die out, like typists. Which was a very liberating and relatively easy job for women.
Yes.
In an era which was not really far from now.
Well,
but then they had to learn to do something else. I think
we seem to be bent on replacing humans with machines in so many areas. What are we going to do with all these humans that can no longer get a salary or no longer go to work? How are they going to support the economy? And I'm using heavy air quotes here because
I think more and more jobs will pop up, like it was with those ladies who worked on the typewriters. New jobs and new professions emerged for them. And I do believe there were more and more jobs in creative industries because more people work at home, and after a long day at work, at their home, they want to go out. It's not like they were sitting in the office all day and they only want to get home.
But now they have TV, so they don't have to go out. Now they have YouTube. Now they have Zoom, so they don't have to go out.
They don't have to, but after you've been sitting in front of the screen the whole day, you something want to move, to change the scenery, like to go somewhere. Because sitting around in your apartment 24 hours a day can be stressful.
Can be very stressful. Yes, I know.
As we all remember from the pandemic times.
Oh boy!
People have more and more leisure, more and more time. They don't waste their time in traffic or in public transportation, and they will use this time for entertainment. So I think entertainment industry will have a big boom, and there will be more and more new professions which we cannot even imagine now, like with all this VR thing, which may be developing, or it may die
reality
out.
Will replace everybody's reality.
Yes, but I'm not that sure. Yeah, maybe it will evolve into something else. or integrate into something else. And there are all tools that we can experiment with and we can integrate in our own work. For instance, I have written another play, which I would like to be staged as an immersive performance. So the readers, no, I'm always talking about the readers because I'm in a writing class now, which is a separate story. But I mean, the spectators are invited to take part in the performance by taking photos and videos. Because normally a spectator has to sit in the dark for 2 hours watching a performance which they don't even necessarily understand or can relate to, because it can be something really experimental or something telling them about problems and issues that have nothing to do with their own. And they cannot even make a single photo for their Instagram like they are used to, like they do everywhere where they go. Yeah. So I always feel pity for those spectators who've paid a lot of money and spent a lot of time, and they have to sit at the performance, and they might like it.
But that's what people have been doing for 5,000 years. They've been paying their money and they go sit while somebody else entertains them.
That's true. But at that time, there was no Instagram. They could write a letter to their friends telling them how exciting the performance was or how shitty the performance was. But now it would not work. You have to post a photo. If you just post a paragraph of text, nobody will read it.
Well, to be perfectly fair, people used to shout back at Shakespeare that his performances, and there's been a lot of art that is immersive. One of the more famous, at least in the United States, has been the phenomenon of Rocky Horror, where people go every week, they know the words, they recite things, they yell things back at the characters on screen, and it becomes a sociological gathering of like-minded people who are just making a whole new art form out of something else. So, yeah, maybe, it's I'm hoping you're right. I'm hoping your optimism is correct about the adaptability of humans to adjust to the scientific and sociological changes that are affecting the artistic world. We've done it up until now, and I'm assuming we're going to keep doing it somehow, but trying to read the future, that's where the real artistic imagination comes in. Trying to figure out what the future is going to look like.
That's true. And the good thing that you can do it eternally.
Yes.
Because there are so many possibilities.
You cannot stop imagination. Ekaterina, this has been so much fun talking to you. I wish we could go out for another couple of hours. It's been lovely speaking with you.
Oh, thank you.
Hey kids, thanks for listening to On Stage, Off Stage. On Stage, Off Stage is produced monthly, and all of our shows can be found at onstageoffstage.org and also on Podbean, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeart, and Google Podcasts. If you enjoy what we do, please recommend us to your friends. Don't forget to like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter at OnOffStage. And if you are a theater artist with an upcoming project or interest, or know of someone in the theater world who'd make good chat, by all means, send us a note at onstageoffstagepodcast@gmail.com. Our theme music is Don't Worry, Be Frappy by the composer Max Dickinson. You can find a lot more of Max's magnificent music on SoundCloud. I'm George Sapio. Thanks once again for listening, and please be kind to those with whom we share this rock. And as always, happy theatering to all of you.